Session blood.
All right, welcome everyone to... Whoa, it's us.
Whoa.
In the flesh.
Yeah.
In the flesh and blood. So, yeah, today we decided to do our first recorded webcam video podcast.
We had a lot of feedback on our podcast, and especially on YouTube, it was people just wanted to see us in the flesh and blood. So we've decided to move on to some video stuff as well. So yeah, you might see a lot more of us in the upcoming YouTube videos.
Yeah, and we wanted to start this one off by talking about last time we did a bit of a Thanksgiving episode, which we thought was cool. We thought we wanted to, say what we're thankful for about Flesh and Blood and give back just a little bit to all of you who have supported us all the way through.
Yeah, and I have to say, I've never celebrated Thanksgiving, and I've only kind of seen it in movies, so it was actually nice experience a bit of, this Thanksgiving spirit, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was really cool, and we were like sort of blown away. We got a whole bunch of emails in, which was really cool, because we weren't kind of sure what the response would be, but we wanted to throw it out there to the community. So I thought maybe we'd kick things off by announcing the prizes and saying our winners.
Yeah.
So the mystery prize we're talking about is we wanted to give out one of our brand new Session Blood caps, which I'm wearing today as well.
There you go.
So initially our plan was we wanted to announce 3 winners, and they were going to be getting one of our caps and 3 booster packs of probably Welcome to Wraith Unlimited.
Yeah.
But we had so many responses that, we're still just going to give out 3 hats and 3 packs, but we also wanted to give out a couple of additional prizes of 3 booster packs.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that it was really nice getting that kind of like a range of responses. We had people who Flesh and Blood has really helped, and I guess, the podcast and the content that's been out there has really helped getting through COVID, and, takes a toll on all of us around the world, so it's nice to kind of have something to look forward to and enjoy while kind of, whether you're stuck at home and or you're having a pretty rough time. It's nice to have something to kind of lean back on. And then we had some content that was more humorous, some lighthearted stuff, and for me, it was a big thing as by how the amount of people that thanked for the community that they're getting, being able to just go to an armory, even if it's restricted, being able to catch up with mates on the regular, or even make new friendships. It's really nice.
Definitely, because there are a few people who talked about things that we'd mentioned in the Thanksgiving one about sort of reconnecting with old friends or with old playgroups that played other games and then they'd fallen out of contact. Flesh and Blood gave them the way to reconnect these friendships, or even like you mentioned, make new friends, even playing through TTS if they weren't able to meet up in the Flesh and Blood because of COVID restrictions. And like Carol mentioned, a few people who mentioned, I think that we all can relate to having a bit of a tough time in 2020 with COVID. It's being stuck inside for months on end isn't the easiest thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So without further ado, I suppose we'll announce our 3 main winners. So our 3 main winners are we'll contact you via email to get your addresses, and we'll send you through one of our Session Blood caps and 3 packs. So our first winner was Grace James from the United States.
Yeah, congrats.
Congratulations, Grace. And our second winner
was Marcin Głowacki from Poland. So it's good to see a range of areas that people have replying to. So yeah, congratulations to you as well.
Yeah, that's actually really cool, because just before we announced our third winner, we were actually pretty stoked to see we had responses from sort of all around the world for these regions. We had sort of America, Germany, Poland, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, all over the place. So that was really awesome. And our third winner, speaking of the UK, is Adam Philparts, who actually mentioned that he'd been playing a few TTS leagues organised by Simon Denning, who I think we gave a shout out last week. And we love to see that, like all these new players jumping in and, even if you can't play in real life, being able to keep the game going and play other
definitely.
ones.
And mad props to anyone who's organising any events, whether it's in person or online. I think it's really important for the game, so good on you.
Yeah, and so those are our 3 main winners. So like we said, you're getting the cap and 3 booster packs, and we did decide that because of all the emails, we'd give out 2 further prizes, just of 3 Welcome to Wraith packs. And our first one is one of our favourites that Carol and I both appreciated.
Yeah, it's Jake Wenger, or Wenger, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but thanks for your message.
Definitely knows how to get to our hearts. So he appreciated Carol's rogue decks and Kieran's jokes. To make someone, my partner doesn't really do it, and Carol doesn't appreciate them either. But
do sometimes.
Thank you, Jake. You've given me the validation that I desperately seek. So, and our final winner.
Yeah, the last winner is Alex Becker. And I think he's been mentioned that he's been following our content since the inception. So
from the early days.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for for the following, and thanks for watching our content and listening to us.
Yeah, I feel we had a good mix between sort of newer players and older players and all that sort of thing of people messaging us in. So, and like we say, we had so many of us, unfortunately we couldn't give prizes out to everyone, but we'd definitely look to do more of these giveaways, some sort of prizes in the future. Because like we say, we produce the content for all of you guys, and we appreciate your support, truly.
Yeah. And, moving into the kind of what we want to talk about, first I want to just update all those people who've been interested in my result on my Ranger control list. There's been a lot of messages asking how I went, and
not very well, but
I've made the list. I went to my local armory. I was ready to play, but I was missing 2 cards. One of them was one red in the ledger, and the other one was the Skullbone Crosswrap. Skullbone Crosswrap.
Ranger Legendary, a pretty key card for the deck.
And unfortunately there was no one there to lend it to me. I just kind of went in there hoping that someone would have it, so I did end up going to my Blitz Katsu list.
What is wrong with this community?
Yeah. I went 3-1, not the result I hoped for, but Katsu is not a dead deck, and Blitz, that's something for you to take away from this. But stay tuned for, I forked up, a sizable sum to get myself a cold foil cross wrap, so I shall be playing some Ranger soon enough.
Okay, I was doing it for the community. And actually, we just wanted to give one shout out today as well, speaking of Blitz, speaking of winners, to Jacob Pearson, who is actually the winner of the BlitzCon event. So he was playing his own version of Ira Control.
Yeah.
And
I think he calls it the Ira midrange.
He calls it Ira, okay, my apologies, Ira midrange.
It's a bit of a control with a few, some Razor reflexes in there.
A little bit of spice in there.
A little bit of spice.
Yeah, and so big shout out to Jacob for he managed to take down Matt Rogers, #1 ranked player in the world in the finals. So and Ira Mirror. So that's no small feat.
It's really impressive.
I believe he opened the Gold Mask of Momentum as well. So
pretty on theme.
Yeah, pretty on theme. Well done, Jacob. All right, so anyway, should we get into the theme of today's episode?
Just one quick thing beforehand.
Okay.
Probably while you're watching this, I've also talked about this Go Again Bravo list and Blitz that.
Here we go.
Probably when you're watching this, it should be available on Channel Fireball to read up on. I have an article that's going to be published in a few days from now, so it should be available when you're watching this. It's called the Swift Blitz Bravo.
Oh, the Swift Blitz. I like the name. And I have had a sneak peek at this deck, and I recommend you have it read because it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's one of those decks you look at and you're like, I don't know, and then you dig a little deeper and you're like,
this could work.
It could work.
Yeah. Moving on to the big topic of what we want to talk about today.
It's dealing with Dorinthia.
Yeah, so many messages that we've been getting as people are just like, how do I beat Warrior? How do I block this annoying as hero that basically this class that just keeps on punishing you over and over again and really trips you up if you block badly. So we really want to cover how you defeat Dorinthia.
Yeah, deal with Dorinthia.
Deal with Dorinthia?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, and we totally understand these concerns because I think when we both started playing as well, Dorinthia was really one of those decks that it just felt like such a chore to play against. Like you're playing against this deck that it feels like you just have to block perfectly so many times in a row. Like they have the classic turns where they pitch a blue card and play like a Red Warrior's Valor, so it gives the weapon +3, and if it hits, gains Go Again. And then they attack you, they've got 1 resource up, they've got like 3 cards in hand, and you're thinking just, how do I deal with this without getting blown out?
Yeah, exactly. And there's just so many different threats, and I think that's what makes it tricky to block, Sometimes you think, okay, I'll just block with 3 cards, block it for 9, and then they glint and, do something else. Glint and light and strike you for 7 or something. So there's a lot of ways to get punished by Dorinthia.
And I feel like Crucible of Wars actually made it even a little bit more difficult because they've got cards like Spoils of War, which gives the weapon +2 attack and just automatic Go Again. So even if you block out the weapon, they still have an action point to do something else with. Things like Hit and Run, was just the 0 cost action, gives your weapon go again. So, it was already difficult and then it got harder. So, but there is a way. There is a way.
So first thing I just want to distill the kind of the core of the class. The warrior generates an advantage is they have to do 2 main things, and that's really important to keep in mind, which is first one is they need to give their weapon go again somehow. So we've seen, we've talked about the most common one is Warrior's Valor. Warrior's Valor needs to hit as well, and that is the point number 2, being the Dawnblade has to hit you to be able to attack again. I mean, there's things like Twinning Blade that are a bit niche, but give your weapon another attack. But most of the time, you need to stop one of these things. So one of them is you getting hit by Dawnblade, which of course is pretty tough when you play against it because of all the, they have all these pumps, all these reprises and things like that. And secondly is, stopping that go again, which a lot of the time it's the same thing. You have the refraction bolters and Warrior's Valor, which both rely on hitting. So sometimes hitting stopping that first hit is crucial to stop them the rest of their turn. So
I guess we just want to run through like a few. Basically, the idea is we want to try and run through a few situations where we have a few suggestions on how you can probably block them, or like when you want to block, when you don't want to block, and effectively thinking about like what is their objective for this turn and how can I stop it. I guess necessarily it's going to be a little bit generalized rather than doing like a class by class breakdown, and we might mention a few examples of classes. But just some general tips and tricks, because there's definitely a few like mistakes to avoid, I feel.
And I think it's like, before we go into kind of specific examples and looking at specific threats, I think it's good to discuss what are some of the disadvantages of Warrior that you can really punish them for. And I think the main one is when you play against Warrior, stripping the cards in their hand is really punishing. A warrior with, 4 cards in hand and a card in arsenal is exponentially stronger than a warrior with 2 cards in hand and no arsenal, for example. So I feel like the kind of 2 main ways really to deal with warrior, firstly, is you want to block correctly. So that's something I'm going to dive into, but once you block correctly and stop them from achieving their objective, it's really hard for them to snowball or gain any advantage. And secondly, you really want to put on pressure so that you strip away their cards and really force them to use those cards so that when it's their turn, their turn is really weak.
Yeah, and the thing is, it probably sounds a bit obvious to say like, the deck is a lot better if you have 4 or 5 cards in hand. I mean, we've said that about Ninja and Katsu as well. But one of the things about Warrior is that like the more cards they have, the more there's like so many different lines of play that you have to play around. I mean, a Guardian player with 4 cards in hand, yes, it's obviously stronger, but you kind of know what you're getting into. Like, they might play a huge Crush card with Dominate, or, a Command and Conquer and they threaten a Pummel, but you kind of know what you're getting into in a way. Whereas a Warrior player, if they pitch a blue card and like play one of their, a Warrior's Valor and attack with their weapon, if they've got 3 cards in hand, suddenly you just, you're thinking like, there's so many different things they can do. Like if I block like this, then they can do this. If I don't block, they can do this. It's kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So that's what we sort of mean by saying that it's very important to pressure them when you're able to. So either force them to take damage so you can get a bit of a life buffer, or to just make your life a little bit easier when you're blocking.
Yeah, and also kind of, adding on to that, Warrior is very resource intensive. So a lot of the pumps, when you compare something like, the classic pump, like a Razor Reflex, for example, which is, a very common card to play around any card that costs 1, an attack reaction that pumps your weapon by 3. That's another resource they have to pay for it. So something like Nimblism gives an attack plus 3 up front, but because it's an attack reaction, it, costs that extra resource. So also stripping their hand kind of limits their plays. So I've seen people, just to get in like a real quick example, is, someone pitches a yellow card, no resources on Tunic, pitches a yellow card, goes Warrior's Valor and attacks with Dawnblade with nothing else up, no cards, for example. they don't have any resources, so you're not forced to block that warrior's valor. Like I've seen people, double block just because they're scared of that and of something else popping up. Whereas if you pay attention to the cards in hand and resources, sometimes you can work out that, wait a second, if they pump their Dawnblade, they won't have any resources to swing again. So yeah, there's just a lot of kind of things you have to keep in mind that you have to think what they might have in their hand.
Yeah, so paying attention to their resources is quite an important one.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, what Carol was sort of mentioning there is that, say a warrior player has 3 cards in hand, and then one example, they pitch a blue card, they play Warrior's Valor, say a red copy, it doesn't really matter which one, and then they attack in for 6. Now at this point, they have 1 resource up. So generally speaking, there's a few examples, things like Iron Song Response that cost 0. But generally speaking, if you block for 6, you're feeling reasonably safe, because like if they do use that 1 resource to pump up their weapon for an extra 3 damage, yes, you've taken 3 damage, but then they can't attack with their weapon again. So, and again, that is very general because there are exceptions, things like Singing Steel Blade, which we'll get into. But that's just one example of where, by paying attention to their resources, you can comfortably just, if you've got a decent hand, you can just block that with 2 cards. Say, if you want to deal 3 damage to me, not have an arsenal card, not be able to attack with your weapon again, I'm fine with that. I'll take the 3 damage, and then I'll look to pressure you back on my turn. So paying attention to Warrior's resources is very important.
Yeah.
And that probably goes for a lot of classes, but yeah, particularly for Warrior.
Yeah, and kind of going into more of, general tips against playing against Warrior is, I think Warrior is the one class that when you're playing against it, you always have to take the back seat. I feel like it's really hard because of the Dawnblade counter. This is an effect that stays in play, and it gets exponentially more punishing the more you leave this counter on. So I feel like out of any classes, Warrior is probably the one class that you want to take the back seat and you want to play defensively against, and that means making sure that your list that you're playing with can cope with a warrior. So that means often look at your cards that block for 2 or don't block at all. Things like running maybe sigils, a one-off could be decent against something like Shunt later on in the game, but most of the time you want to limit the cards that can't block effectively, or that you're 100% going to either use or pitch on your turn. So I would strongly recommend for anyone playing against Warrior to look at their list and make sure that all the cards that don't block or block for 2, are very core to your strategy. So
yeah, I suppose this particularly goes for Classic Constructed in a way as well, because in Blitz, Warrior is one hero of many, and it's a good deck, but
yeah, I think we want to focus basically looking at Classic Constructed, where you can actually have cards to choose from in your 80.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out of your 80. And secondly, obviously, when it comes to playing defensively, is looking at your equipment and making sure. Classes like Warrior itself, Guardian,
Brute.
and Brute. Those, and I think, those are the kind of 3. And I think Dash is quite good as well in that you have a lot of options when it comes to blocking. But even something like adding an Iron Rod legs or an Iron Rod arms can make a huge difference in the matchup, because that equipment, the longer you have it in play, the more your opponent who's playing Warrior is running out of threats, and basically things like Iron Song Determination become less and less
sort of
punishing, the more equipment you have. So,
and I suppose one example, you mentioned Iron Rock Gauntlet as well. If you're playing a deck like, say, Dash, for example, it might be tempting to run the Goliath Gauntlet. Maybe you're running some Command and Conquers, and you want to get off that big turn where Goliath Gauntlet, the equipment, doesn't block, but you can destroy it to give a 2 cost or more attack action plus 2 power. So it might be tempting to run that thinking like, I'm just waiting for the big turn where I get off my Command and Conquer for 8. Or in Guardian, you might want to run that over Crater Fist, for example, which blocks. But like Carol mentioned, that's a no-no. Like, because...
Okay, like looking at the play of Command and Conquer for 8 with Goliath Gauntlet, firstly, all Warrior cards block for 3. So if you're throwing out a command, all of their cards block for 3, so it's a lot easier for them to, to double block a normal Command and Conquer. If you chuck a Goliath Gauntlet on top of that, then you're attacking a class that is very high in armor. So the chances are that they even have a Skull Cap, Courage of Blade Hold, or their braces up, and it's just not very effective.
Yeah, exactly. So you're giving up a lot for that one play, which a good warrior player is going to, particularly on a deck like Dash, which doesn't have that many on-hit effects. A good warrior player is just going to wait all day long for you to play that. They know you've got that Goliath Gauntlet. They're just looking at it, waiting. You play your Command and Conquer for 8 with your Goliath Gauntlet, and they say, okay, I'll block with 2 cards and my Brave Forge Braces. Yeah. And then you haven't actually stripped the card from their hand. You've just given them value to use their Brave Forge Braces on. Whereas Iron Rock Gauntlet, like Carol mentioned, that warrior has like a lot of really annoying sort of breakpoints, I suppose, in a way for blocking. So attacks which come in for 4. Being able to have that Iron Rock Gauntlet as a backup, so if you really need to, you can block with, say, a card from hand and the Iron Rock Gauntlet, can really either help you set up your turn or save you from like a really annoying attack.
Yeah.
Things like Warrior's Valor, the blue copy, for example, gives +1 attack to Dawnblade, and it's really annoying that if you don't have access to any equipment or you don't have your attack defense reaction, then if they attack for 4, even if you block with 2 cards, you're blocking 6 versus 4 now. So 1 attack reaction for +3, which most of their attack reactions are for, puts theirs up to 7. Yeah. So now you've used 2 cards from your hand, you've taken 1 damage, and they're probably going to attack you again. And things like Brave Forge Braces, for example, you can pay 1 resource and give your second weapon attack of the turn +1 damage. So that means that attack is now coming in for 4, which could be another 2 cards from your hand. So a lot of these things, it's just, that simple Iron Rock Gauntlets will help you out a lot. And I suppose speaking generally about equipment, since we are speaking about that, I think often good warrior players, they're playing the long game. So they're looking to pick off your equipment throughout the course of the game. So by playing long game, it doesn't mean they're playing defensively. It means that they're setting up their strategy. They're looking at it being like, okay, if I can sort of bait my opponent into trying to save a card from their hand and block with their big block equipment, things like their legendary equipment that block for 2, they know that if they can slowly pick off these equipment blocks throughout the course of the game, that lets them set up these turns in the late game where they've pitched away things like Iron Song Determination, which is an action that gives their weapon +1 to dominate. Things like Steelblade Supremacy, cards like Glint the Quicksilver, an attack reaction with it gives their weapon go again and reprise. So if you block, it lets them draw a card. So once you're sort of like naked in a way, once you've run out of equipment, that's when the warrior player sort of their eyes light up and they think, I've got like a clear run at punching through for damage. So generally speaking, with equipment, I mean, sometimes you're forced to use it, sometimes it's a bit situational, but against warrior, I feel like often if they are attacking in for 5, unless you've got a really good hand, rather than getting greedy and saying I'll block with 1 card from hand and I'll block with my legendary equipment for exactly 5, it's sometimes better just to block with 2 cards from hand. Like the thing is there as well, if you block for 5 using your equipment and then they use an attack reaction anyway, it just feels like such bad value for you. Yeah. Like the warrior player, even if they get through only 2 or 3 damage on that turn, they are just really happy. Like they've got a huge defensive block out from you and the equipment, and they've still got damage through, and they strip more cards from your hand.
Yeah.
Same situation. If you block with 2 cards from hands, they use an attack reaction to give it +3. You take a couple of damage. They attack again. You block with the rest of your hand. You haven't really lost a whole lot there. I mean, you've lost a few cards from your hands, but you've held on to your like critically important defensive equipment.
Yeah, and talking about defending with equipment, it's basically the aim of the game is to save that equipment as long as you can. Basically, the longer you save your equipment, the more they run out of threads and the less they can do with those kind of blowout turns later on. And still talking about kind of playing defensively, I strongly recommend having some space for defense reactions. And I think that's a really big one. I recommend having in your list at least 4, maybe I like running 6 0-cost defense reactions.
And these are critical for warrior.
Yeah, and this is something that just helps you against those their attack reactions. I mean, they go into a Valor play, attack you for 6, you block for 6, they pump it, and you get blown out without it. So yeah, this is something and that is really key to beating warrior. And another thing that I really want to stress is try to put less emphasis on having really good 5-card hands, because if you're blocking, you're going to end up with 2-3 card hands because you want to block turn after turn. And I think you really need to look at your strategy as like, does my deck perform the best with 5 cards, or am I okay to put on pressure with 2 cards? I mean, I'm a brute player, so the best example I can think of is single barraging beatdown and weapon swing. I can use 2 or 3 cards, including my arsenal, to completely stop their turn. Then on my turn, I play a barraging beatdown, intimidate a card, attack with a club that's coming in for 8 damage. They either have to use 2 cards, which are most likely that one of them is going to be a threat, to block that completely, and then they're left with a 2 or 3 card hand, which is much easier to defend for me. So you want to think of ways to put on pressure with 1 or 2 cards. I mean, like Guardian, Brute, and a lot of classes can do it with a single pitch and attacking with weapon. It's not much, but it's always something.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why you often see decks like Ninja or Katsu traditionally have quite tough matchups against decks like Warrior, because Ninja is a classic deck as well that you really want to have sort of like 4 to 5 card hands, so like 4 cards plus Arsenal, and on top of that you have cards that block for 2. A lot of your combat, a
lot of your attacks.
Yeah, the traditional combo openers, things like Leg Tap, Head Jab, Surging Strike, all block for 2. And again, like, it's one of those decks that if you're committed to playing Ninja and you know your metagame has a lot of Warrior, then you need to make a few sacrifices in your 80 card list in order to give you a shot at actually beating them.
Yeah.
So you want to have access to cards, like we mentioned before, the importance of defense reactions.
Yeah.
Things like Flick Flack,
Flick Flack is insane against Warrior. I can't stress that enough how good this card is against Warrior. You have a 0-cost defense reaction that blocks their first attack. If they still manage it to push through damage, then your combo piece blocks for 2 more, so you blocks for 5. So even if they Brave Forge braces their next attack or have some kind of a pump, you're just almost pretty much stopping that next follow-up attack anyway.
Yeah, and it's also good against for go wide warriors who might play cards like Scar for a Scar or Life for a Life. So these are the 0 or 1 cost attack actions that hit for 4 damage. So you might see warriors sort of open up with these attacks to try either strip cards out of your hand to make their weapon attack more threatening, or just to get through damage. Being able to play something like Flick Flack on that in Ninja, it blocks out their first attack, and like Carol mentioned, it makes your second block so much stronger. Flick Flack, just one example, more illustrating the power of defense reactions generally, rather than the actual, playing the Ninja versus Warrior matchup, because we don't want to get too hung up on the actual classes. But we stress the importance of defense reactions so much because it brings us to one of our next themes, which is playing around Reprise.
Yeah, I think just talking about defense reactions, a lot of people really rate Unmovable as a means of stopping Warrior, which is a good card. I think it's a good card at stopping the kind of go tall Warrior. Personally, I haven't had much success playing Unmovable, just because you're committed to having quite a large number of blue cards to be able to use one card to pitch for it and use it. It can really stop a Warrior, but it's a very niche card that I think works really well in that matchup, maybe like Guardian and stuff. But yeah, I think I feel like just playing around with defense reactions, see what works. I'm a big fan of Springboard Somersault. I really like that as it's a 0 cost that blocks for 4 if it's in your arsenal. But also pitches for 2. So when you see your opponent using lots of Iron Song Determinations, I personally like to try and time it and try and pitch a somersault when they pitch an Iron Song Determination. So then I have it ready when they go for their Iron Song play.
Yeah, and Springboard Somersault, it's the only defense reaction in the game that blocks for 4 that pitches for 2.
Yeah.
So all your other ones like Flick Flack, Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, these 0 cost red defense reacts block for 4. That's why Somersault is so good, because you can use that as a resource card.
Yeah.
And trust me, it always feels annoying as like a Warrior or Ninja player that you attack him for 4 and they flip over that Springboard Somersault from Arsenal. You're like, definitely. They just got value on me. And yeah, and speaking of Unmovable, the issue with that card against Warrior is, particularly in Classic Constructed, where you're playing for quite a wide metagame, if you're playing cards like Red Unmovable in particular, it's great against Guardian. It's not particularly good against the whole lot else.
Maybe like Ranger, but...
The thing is, against Warrior, like Carol was saying, is that it seems great, right? On paper, it seems really good, because you've got this defense reaction that you just put down an Arsenal, and then you just wait. And then you just, you're waiting for this big turn where they go like Iron Song Determination to give it +1 and Dominate, and then Steelblade Supremacy to give it, which card, gives a weapon +2, and until end of turn, if it hits, they get to draw a card. You're basically waiting for them to like layer up all these huge attacks down, and then you just blank their whole turn with Unmovable for 8. And and if you get that off, it's great. That can be the tempo swing that wins you the game. The issue is, again, like good Warrior players are probably going to be aware of that. And once that Red Unmovable's been sitting in your arsenal for a turn or two, they start to think to themselves, like, what's that card in their arsenal that they're not using? And then
the only thing that makes sense is
a Red Unmovable. So then they're going to just play around that. Like, they're not going to... They might just play, like, a Warrior's Valor or something to give their weapon +1 or +2 and attack. And then the problem is with that, you can Unmovable that, but then you've used 2 cards.
Yeah,
you've
pitched an attack for 4.
Yeah, you've pitched the card from your hand, and you've played an Unmovable to stop an attack for 4. And again, speaking of breakpoints, a Red Unmovable from Arsenal blocks for 8 damage. So if they play something like a Red Warrior's Valor and attack you for 6, you still can't rely on just the Unmovable. Like, you play the Red Unmovable, blocking for 8, and then they use something like an Alpha Blood, which is a 1-cost attack reaction that gives a +3, or a Razor Reflex, and suddenly you've pitched the card, you've used your Arsenal card, you've still taken 1 damage, and you have to deal with their follow-up attack. So, personally, like, Carol and I differ a little bit on cards like Blue Unmovable. I quite like it in certain decks. Carol's not a fan of it in Brute. He's kind of the Brute master, but
it's a card I think I just still haven't learned to use properly. It's still... Same talking about Springboard Somersault. It's a card that I didn't like playing because I found it so clunky when I wanted to block for 4, and it's in my hand. I haven't set an arsenal yet. And it frustrated me until I learned to utilize it a lot better and actually gain value from it from, just waiting a little bit, waiting that 1 turn and being able to set an arsenal or pitching it, using it for its pitch value and saving it for later. And that's when I really clicked how good the card is. Yeah, and to be honest, recently I think I've been putting it in like every blitz list that I play. I love the card.
Yeah, so cards like Blue Unmovable, it can be quite good as long as your deck can support the resources. So the good thing about Unmovable, it's the blue one, it's a blue card, so it just doubles as a resource card, and it's pretty decent at most matchups. Like in a pinch, you can play it against Ninja and stuff like that as well. But yeah, the issue with the resource-heavy defense reaction, like Red Unmovable, which only pitches for red as well, is I've seen a lot of players run it in like Ninja lists, for example, with like 11 blue cards, or like 10 or 11 blue cards, or even like these aggressive Runeblade lists where you're running 12-ish blue cards. It's okay, but even if like the worst case scenario, which I used to run it in Ninja, it happened to me a lot, is they attack and it's like the best time for my Unmovable, but I have to pitch like 2 cards to play it, or even 3 cards to play it. And then
or like 2 and a Tunic, and then you're just like, well, was that even that great?
Yeah, and if you're pitching 2 cards to play Unmovable, you've used 3 cards effectively to block 1 attack. And sometimes, even if you do have the blue card, you have 1 blue card in hand. So you pitch your blue card, play the Unmovable, and suddenly you've got like 3 red cards left in your hand. So your turn is useless anyway. So just kind of be aware of the pitch count in your deck, and if it can support Unmovable. And yeah, we actually prefer using the 0-cost defense reactions, and I suppose, should we move on to talk about why? I guess in relation to... I feel Reprise is a big one that we should address, because Reprise is the classic mechanic in Warrior. So Reprise is a conditional effect on a lot of attack reactions, where basically if the player has blocked with a card from hands, it gets a bonus. So your really classic Reprise cards, I feel, are things like Glint the Quicksilver, which is a 0-cost attack reaction, gives your weapon go again, and Reprise, draw a card. And the other one is Singing Steelblade, which is a huge one. 1-cost attack reaction, gives +1 to your attack, your weapon attack, and if they blocked, you get to search up your deck for an attack reaction and put it into your hand.
So you're allowed to use it in that chain link.
Sorry, you're allowed to play it. You're allowed to banish it and play it during that chain link.
Yeah.
And so these are the cards that I think people often find themselves in difficult spots playing against, right? Because
or just blown out by.
Yeah, because and things like Iron Sonal Response, I suppose, is the third one we mentioned. So it's a 0-cost attack reaction. The red one gives +3, but only if they have Reprise. So if you don't block, they actually just can't play it at all. So we wanted to run through those, because those I feel are the 3 really key Reprise ones. There's a few others that we'll mention as well, but those are the ones that you'll encounter quite a lot. And the benefit of defense reactions is, 0-cost defense reactions in particular, is that you can play them from Arsenal for free, and they don't trigger Reprise. And that can be like absolutely game-changing at times if you need it to be. So for example, like I feel a classic situation might be if your opponent, attacks with a Dawnblade without playing anything. So, they might have 3 cards in hand, they pitch a blue card and just attack with Dawnblade. So if you have a defense reaction arsenal, this gives you so many options. Because first of all, you can basically decide, okay, that's your whole turn, sweet. Like, if you just want to hit me for 3 damage, that's fine. I'll take 3 damage and I'll just have my turn.
Yeah, so the really important thing here is if a Dawnblade's attacking you with nothing else, first of all, there's no go again on it. They might have a refraction bolters that most of the time you're happy for them to pop after attacking you with a Dawnblade by itself. What they are most likely representing is a glint of Quicksilver. So the worst case scenario is they attack you with Dawnblade with, no pumps on it, attack you for 3, you block over a card for 3, they glint of the Quicksilver, draw a card, which immediately replaces itself, it gives a go again, and then they use an attack reaction to go over your block. So this is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and I guess on that, another version of that, which is sort of even worse sometimes, is the classic, they attack for 3, you block with 1 card, they play Stinging Steelblade. So now their attack is hitting for 4. They get to look through the deck, find a Glint the Quicksilver, also play that, drawing them a card, and suddenly you're taking 1 damage, and they've replaced their card in hand from the Stinging Steelblade.
And you lost a card to block that.
Yeah. So now and then effectively from there, you're going to be giving up probably 2 more cards to block their next attack.
Yeah.
So that's I suppose the power of defense reactions from Arsenal is that, like we mentioned, that if they attack with, say, a naked Dawnblade, so by that we mean with no pumps, nothing threatening, is that you're happy just to wait it out. So it's important to focus on your sequencing as well when you do this. What you absolutely don't want to do is if they attack with their Dawnblade, you don't want to be sort of waiting, you don't want to sort of jump the gun effectively and just immediately play your defense reaction, because that gives them too much value, because they might have been wanting to play that Glint the Quicksilver or some sort of attack reaction, and if you play your defense reaction first from Arsenal, it just lets them say, I'll save this for next turn, or I can plan my turn around this. So always make them make the first move. On top of that, the sequencing 0-cost defense reactions, even if you don't have it in Arsenal, you can make them make the play. So they attack you with their Dawnblade. You wait and you say no initial blocks, and then it goes to attack reactions. And
so then the pressure's on them to make something happen, right?
Yeah, because then if they pass priority in their attack reactions, and then you pass priority on your defense reactions, then it's done. It goes straight to damage. You've taken 3 damage. And if they've got 3 cards in hand, that's amazing for you. They used their whole turn to get through 3 damage. And
you just have either 4 cards in hand, no arsenal, or even an arsenal and 4 cards in hand, which means they use their whole turn to deal 3 damage, leaving you with a whole hand.
And if they want to be playing, making that Glint the Quicksilver play, let's say they attack you for 3, you say no initial blocks. If they then play the Glint the Quicksilver to give their weapon go again, that's when you can then play the defense reaction, from hand, and it then puts the pressure on them to actually pump their weapon over the top. And then particular thing is, because that Glint the Quicksilver hasn't replaced the card.
Yeah, so they don't get a reprise trigger, they don't replace the card, so they used up a whole card to give their weapon go again, and now they have to fight to actually be able to attack with it again.
Exactly, and particularly if you put a bit of pressure on them and they've only got sort of 2 or 3 cards in hands, often that might mean, we talked about paying attention to resources earlier, they might play the Glint, and then even if they can play an attack reaction to get over the top of your sort of defense reaction, two important things occur here. Firstly, they might not be able to attack with the weapon again, which is amazing for you. Or secondly, they might only have one resource left, which is super important because, you know, if they've pitched the blue to attack with weapon, they've played glint, they've played, say, Eraser Reflex, that's what, 1, 2, 3 cards. So if they've got a 3-card hand effectively, if you take damage here, and then they can only attack you for 3 without using their Brave Forge Braces, that's great for you, because that means you can block with 1 card from hands and just be super safe and be like, I'm blocking for 3, you've got no cards left in your hands, and that's fine with me. Whereas if they have 2 resources up and they're able to use their Brave Forge Braces, then they're attacking for 4, which is that classic breakpoint. You're going to have to block with 2 cards or use their equipment, and either of those is a big win for the warrior player. So that's why defense reactions are so important. But building on that, you know, that's just one situation. Having a defense reaction arsenal allows you, it's like a really strong insurance policy. It allows you to play the game completely differently. So we, like, another example we keep bringing up, but it's just because it's such like a classic play. It's something like a Red Warrior's Valor or a Spoils of War. So they're attacking in for 5 to 6 damage. And, you know, you've got 4 cards in hand and your Springboard Somersault and Arsenal. Because you have that Springboard Somersault, you're pretty happy just laying down 2 cards to block it. So you're saying, okay, I'll block your attack for 6. Now it's on you. The great thing here is that if they then play, they have to have effectively 2 attack reactions to get through. Because if they play the attack reaction, you can then play your Springboard Somersault. You're now blocking for 10 versus their 9 damage. And all is right in the world, you know. You're happy with how this interaction, this sort of turn cycle has gone.
And that kind of you know, shows that you don't want to kind of, you know, throw out the defense reaction straight away. This is something that is extremely valuable in the matchup, and sometimes it's best to even take a few points of damage. You know, if you block with 2 cards, and let's say they pitched a blue, they went Warrior's Valor attacking you for 6, and you block it for 6 with 2 cards, and they raise the reflex it, and you clearly see that they can't attack again with their weapon, then it's actually best to take the 3 damage and save that defense reaction for next turn, because this is the card that you want to see. This is the card that gives you value. You know, your defense reaction costs 0, it blocks for 4, their attack reactions cost 1 and pump by 3. So in each of these interactions, you're actually ahead a little bit. So if you draw out the game like this, eventually you will end up ahead.
Yeah, because a warrior player in that situation, like Carol mentioned, like even for example, like you block for 6 and then they use a Razor Reflex and you see they've got 1 resource remaining. Again, often you just want to save that defense reaction anyway. You might be thinking, okay, like if you're playing a deck like Brute or Guardian, for example, where you can attack back with your weapons, you're like, okay, so now they're just going to attack me for 3 more damage. That's fine with me. I'm just going to block with my 1 card from hand. Now my turn is, I've got 1 card in hand. I've got that defense reaction arsenal saved up for next turn when I might really need it. And I'm just going to pitch and attack you back with my weapon for 4 damage. And
yeah, something important's happening here. Even attacking, a lot of people think, oh, I'm just attacking for 4, right? This is only 4 damage. But because Warrior is so reliant on having cards in hand and having, you know, those resource-intensive hands, as I mentioned before, chances are they probably won't block. Chances are they're willing to take that 4 damage to try and blow you out on their turn. If the whole turn cycle turns into you dealing 4 damage or even, you know, 1 damage and stripping 1 card in hand and you blocking all their damage, you're slowly over time gaining that advantage in terms of life.
And sometimes you just have to be patient. Like, I mean, Carol's played he's kind of the Brute master. He's played a lot more Brute games than me. But I played Brute at our New Zealand National Champs, and I had some, like, very difficult games against, like, really good Warrior players. And often, like, it feels like you're getting nowhere. Like you spend, like, all these turns where you're blocking with 3 cards from hands. You're blocking with, like, 3 cards from hand, just hitting for 4 with a weapon. But the important thing there is that by doing this, you're keeping up, like, you're either keeping up on life or you're getting slightly ahead on life, which means that when you do have the opportunity for a really big turn or they have an off turn, that's when you can really seize the initiative. Like, if you're taking all this damage over time to get through, like, little attacks through, it's not that good being, you know, you get to a situation where you're down, like, 5 or 6 life, and then you have, like, your absolute dream hand where you can, you know, on Brute, intimidate their whole hand and deal a ton of damage, and then they just throw out something like Warrior's Valor attack with their weapon, and then
that
you have
happens a lot.
and,
So,
then you have to block anyway.
It's so tempting a lot of the time, whether you're playing Brute or whatever other class is, sometimes you draw that dream hand and you're like, wow, like this is the hand I would love to play. And they go, pitch Warrior's Valor or like a Spoils of War or any kind of pre-pump action, and you have to block. Like, basically in this matchup, you are on the defense, and you always have to remember that. You might think, oh, but, I might give them a counter of Dawnblade, and then I'll dish out a bunch of damage at them back, and then, they'll be forced to block. But a lot of the time, they're happy to trade that life for the advantage of the Dawnblade. So then you end up in a situation where they have a counter, they're attacking you for at least 4, maybe 7 with a red Valor or something like that, and then you're putting yourself in a worse and worse spot. You basically want to do everything to stop that Dawnblade counter. There is some argument to actually sometimes it's actually okay to give him a Dawnblade counter, but
it's kind of very limited situations, and you have to like really be aware and calculating ahead, and not just sort of hoping for the best and being like, well, if they don't have a defense reaction, then I can get rid of their counter. Like if you're playing Ninja, sometimes if they use their whole hand to get a counter on Dawnblade, and you look at your hand and say, that's okay because I know I can force them to block with their whole hand, and then the counter's going to drop off anyway, then yeah, sure. But like, you need to be like super confident about that. Like if you're doing that, if you know they're going to have a card in Arsenal end of turn, and you're thinking, well, fingers crossed, I hope that's not a Sink Below or I'm screwed, then like, yeah, like you're losing value. The weapon, like having a Dawnblade having a counter and hitting for 4, it basically means that like the Warrior's Valor for 6 that you could previously block with 2 cards, now you have to block with 3 cards.
And just in terms of blocking, sometimes it's absolutely fine to dump your whole hand, quadruple block their attack, and just say, you know what, you draw your hand again, because Warrior is a class where they need the right pieces at the right time. So sometimes, we talk about Warrior's Valor and Spoils of War a lot, but basically Warrior is a class that needs the right mix of cards. So they need that thing that gives them go again, which is the Warrior's Valor, Spoils of War. They need the resource card to make it all happen, to threaten that attack again, and a lot of the time they need that attack reaction. So one of the weaknesses of Warrior is that throughout the game there will be turns where they have an off turn. So this is your kind of breathing space to be like, okay, I can actually do something, I can put a bit more pressure. So keep in mind that Warrior most likely will have these off turns where they just, draw, I don't know, 3 reds and an attack reaction that they can't even play, or they draw 2 Warrior's Valor and a Spoils of War and a blue, and all they can do is pre-pump. So a lot of the value that Warrior gets is from bluffing these things. So sometimes they might not even have an attack reaction. Sometimes they just have another red Warrior's Valor, or another card that they are willing to save for next turn. So
sometimes you want to respect them, but not respect them too much.
That's why the defense reaction is a great insurance policy, because sometimes they go that classic play of attack red Warrior's Valor, attack with Dawnblade for 6. You block for 6 with 2 cards, and they're like, okay, Arsenal pass. And then you have 2 cards in hand to make a move. Even something like attacking with an attack for 6, like your classic 2-card hand is
like pitch a card and
pitch
play
an
like
attack with like a Drone of Brutality or something.
Yeah.
So that is actually putting quite a bit of pressure on them, because you're either saying you're going to have to waste 2 cards to block this, or 1 card take 3 or take 6. And that is all the pressure you really need for Warrior to get them sweating, because chances are that they will take that damage and they will try and pressure you back. But then you just have the defense reaction arsenal from your previous turn. So,
and on the flip side, if they block with 2 cards, like I mentioned earlier, now they're playing with 2 to 3 cards in hand.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for you to play around. But one situation, because you mentioned that sometimes it's fine to just 3 or 4 card block hand against Warrior, and I totally agree that's correct. But I think one situation we should address is how to block Spoils of War, because Spoils of War, it's a card from Crucible of War. It's really annoying to deal with because, like Carol mentioned, like they need to find a way to give their weapon attack go again, and hit with their weapon. But Spoils of War, because a lot of time
automatically goes that go.
Yeah, because Warriors Valor, they need to get both of those, right? Like they have to hit in order to get the go again. Whereas Spoils of War allows them to just automatically have go again on the weapon. Now, the difficulty in playing around this card is, I think we've seen a lot of sort of modern warrior builds. They play cards like Command and Conquer, even Lightning Strike, which is a bit more classic.
Even Snatch. So
just running through those cards, Command and Conquer, I mean, a lot of you probably know what it does. A two cost attack action, deals 6 damage, and if it deals damage, it destroys the opponent's arsenal card. So the issue with a card like Spoils of War is that they, can pitch a card, attack with Spoils of War, threatening 5 damage, and often you're kind of thinking, if I block with 2 cards, then that...
have that defense reaction and arsenal, double block that Spoils of War, and then they come in with a command, then all of a sudden you're in a lot of...
Yeah, because if you block... Basically, for the Spoils of War, if you block with 3 cards, because if you're thinking, like, I'm going to block for 9, so that means if they, play an attack reaction to give it +3 damage, then I'm ahead. I'm blocking for 9 versus 8 damage. But the issue is, if you do that, they might just say, okay, cool, like, you've blocked with 3, you've overblocked for 9, now you've got 1 card in hand, I'm going to play Command and Conquer, I know you can't block it. You've got 1 card in hand, so one of 2 things happens. Either you block for 3, you take 3 damage, lose your arsenal, you take 6 damage, lose your arsenal, or you block with your hand plus multiple equipments. Any of those situations, Warrior is thrilled with. They're really, really happy.
Yeah.
So that's why, and that's like a really common play. Or even things like they go Spoils of War, you overblock with 3 cards, and then they Enlightened Strike for 7. And then, you block with 1 card, and you take 4 damage, and your whole turn is over. It's wasted. So that's why defense reactions are so critical, again, and why you want to, like, hold on to them. They're gold. They're pieces of gold in your deck.
Yeah.
Because it gives you that flexibility to just double block the Spoils of War and be happy with it. And again, sometimes when you don't have the defense reaction, it might just be correct anyway to just block that Spoils of War with 2 cards. Yeah. So you put the pressure on them. You say, okay, I'm going to block for 6. I know you have go, like, I know your thing has go again. Then even if they use an attack reaction to pump up their weapon and it gets through and they can hit again, you can just lay down your other 2 cards from hand.
It's absolutely fine to do that.
Yeah, so then you've used up your whole hand, you've taken a couple, 2 or 3 damage, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and the turn cycle, they haven't really achieved anything, and you've got rid of one of their really big threats. And that's something I want to make a slight point of, is that the difference of Warriors Valor and Spoils for War, they're read as very similar cards, but you want to approach the blocking differently. Like Kieran mentioned, the Spoils of War already gives go again, so you don't want to overcommit on that block. A lot of the time, it's a mistake to overblock Spoils for War. If you use 3 cards,
particularly if they've got like a 4 or 5 card hands.
Yeah. If they have a big hand, because they can use something like a Snatch or a Command and Conquer or a Enlightened Strike. Whereas with Warriors Valor, because they're so reliant on that on-hit effect, then you can get a lot more value from triple blocking or even quadruple blocking that attack, because you know that once it's stopped, they would need something like a
Glint the Quicksilver or something.
A Glint the Quicksilver
sometimes you're just gonna get blown out anyway. Like you block the Warriors Valor with your whole hand, and they've got the Glint the Quicksilver into Command and Conquer. But like even then, they've used up one of their premier attack reactions to get that through. So at least you've got some value out of that. And like it's kind of, they might have it, but it's less likely. Whereas against Spoils of War, like Harold was saying, like you really get like diminishing returns by blocking with a ton of cards from hand, because they've got access to things like 3 Enlightened Strike. They've got 3 Command and Conquer. They might have something like a Flock of the Featherwalkers, depending on their build. So that's like a 1 cost, deals 5 damage. They have to reveal a 1 cost lower card from hand, and it gives them a Quicken token to use for next turn. So by overblocking the spoils, I feel a lot of the time you're creating value for them.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's contextual. This isn't like a blanket rule. If they go spoils of 1, they've got like 1 card in hand or something, and if you know you can triple block and you're not at risk of getting blown out, then sure. But you do want to be aware of the fact that it already has go again. So whereas Warriors Valor, you shut down the go again by blocking out all the damage. Against Spoils of War, they've already got go again. So just like really, you want to keep that in like the top of your mind.
Yeah. So I guess like the very general, and this is obviously situational, the general idea of blocking is that if they throw out a naked Dawnblade, you don't have to block it. Basically, just try and realize the value of not blocking it. Sometimes you're doing a lot more harm by blocking that than just letting it through. Warrior's Valor, sometimes overblocking is okay. That really have to have that on-head effect to get it going. So it's fine to overblock, but if you have a defense reaction, blocking with 2 cards is fine as well. Spoils, I feel like double blocking is the kind of most efficient thing, because double blocking for 6 kind of stops that, Singing Steelblade as well, and just treasure those defense reactions as well.
Yeah, and cards like Hit and Run, I suppose we should address it, because a lot of warrior builds run cards like Hit and Run, so like generally it's just a 0 cost, give your weapon attack go again. They give your weapon +1, 2, or 3 if it's already dealt damage this turn, but that's kind of like a different story. But this one, I feel like you kind of want to approach it a little bit like a Spoils of War turn. If they play the Hit and Run and attack, if they're attacking for 3 damage there, then usually you're okay, just like, you can double block it with 2 cards, but don't just like go all in and block it with 3 cards. And like sometimes you might even just want to call their bluff and say, I'll block with 1 card, and I'll make you beat me with a defense reaction kind of thing.
Yeah, to be honest, a lot of the time, personally, I mean, they use a whole card to give that go again. If you have a defense reaction, sometimes I like to let it through, and then see what else they have. Because if they go like braces and attack, that's already 2 more resources that they've used. So you're limiting the things that they can have. Or sometimes, they were hoping you block and then play a command, because it's same with Spoils of War, already gets go again. So yeah, it's pretty tough, but...
And I guess there's no perfect formula for blocking against warrior. Like we say, like sometimes... it might actually be correct if they attack with a naked Dawnblade. It might actually be correct to like throw out a block. You might be wanting to draw out that Singing Steelblade or draw out that Glint because you can block with defense reaction. Or if you're running low on life, sometimes they attack with naked Dawnblade and they'll give it like +6 with 2 attack reactions. And I think the important thing to realize is that sometimes like you do everything right and you still get blown out. But like when you're assessing your games against warrior.
I feel like in general you can afford to get blown out once or twice.
Yeah.
It's just when you're constantly getting pressured, that's when it becomes an issue.
And I just think, when analysing your games, just don't sort of fall into the trap of saying like, I didn't block there and they got through 9 damage, so that was a huge mistake. You kind of have to play the percentages, say like how often, and that's another thing, like pay attention to what's in their graveyard. Like
that's the next point is the whole idea behind going defensive against warrior is that when you're dragging the game out later and later and stopping their attacks more and more, over the course of the game, their threats are wearing down. First of all, that they're using up their threats. Then if you're doing what I said and keeping up the little bit of pressure back on them, then they have to block with something. And most of the time, it's some kind of a threat. So over the course of the game, you're gaining more and more information about what they have left. So it's really important, as Kieran was saying, to keep on checking their graveyard and take notes of what threats that they've already used.
I'd also mental notes. You can't write stuff down, but yeah.
Yeah. To take mental note, take mental note of what they have left. And I mean,
because you can get to a point in the game against warrior where you're going through their graveyard at super late game and you see like they've only got like 1 + 3 attack reaction left in the deck, or they've used all 3 Singing Steelblades and all 3 Glint the Quicksilvers.
Yeah.
And suddenly you apply that to what we said previously, and like, if I don't have to play around these cards, then I'm fine with blocking.
That's kind of like advanced, because it does take a lot of kind of like mental strain, but sometimes I personally definitely against warrior, I found myself in situations where, for example, they're bluffing an Iron Song response. That's a really classic one, because Iron Song response is a 0 cost attack reaction that only pumps their weapon on a reprise trigger. So a lot of the time it's a card that's being bluffed because later in the game, you don't have many resources to play with, so they either have an Iron Song response to attack with Dawnblade again, or then they can't attack with Dawnblade with something like a Razor Reflex. So it's a very commonly bluffed attack reaction. So if you pay attention, for example, if you look at their graveyard and see that they've used them all, then you're like, okay, well, makes the decision easy. Basically, the longer you go against warrior, the more information you have about what they have left. And also, this is pretty advanced, but if throughout the game you're paying attention to what they're pitching, especially pay attention to the red cards they pitch, or the really impactful cards like Iron Determination.
Yeah.
Because keeping a mental note of each one of those really prepares you for those late game situations where they attack and you're just like, oh, like, should I overblock it? Should I not block it? Am I going to get blown out? Because you will have more and more information the later it goes.
Yeah, and like I said, that's a little bit more advanced, but what you could try maybe if you're playing a long game against Warrior, and it gets to the point where you each have sort of, 15 to 20 cards left in the deck, that might be a good way to practice it. So, if they've got, you see they've got about 20 cards left, you can, you're allowed to count their deck. If they then pitch away some critical cards like Determination or like a Singing Steelblade, you can just keep in mind, well, that's coming back roughly in 4 to 5 turns if they use their whole hands. Yeah. So, again, a little bit hard to hold on to, but you might be thinking like, mental note, like on your 3rd or 4th turn, you're thinking it's critical that I keep the defense reaction arsenal here. Even if if I can get through damage, I'm going to sacrifice that damage to get the defense reaction down. So,
and I mean, obviously, while we're playing this defensive game, obviously you need to come up with a way to win the game at some point. You can't just be trading blows and then keep and as a general rule, I feel like it's fine to keep on par with the Warrior's life total, but you do want at least kind of you need one spicy play to really throw them off and kind of gain that advantage at some point. I feel like it's fine to, you can go for the grind them out and basically, I don't know, have one red drone and just keep on whacking them with that. But a lot of the time there comes a point in the game where you want to take back the tempo, where you want to start going on the offense. And I feel like that time is usually after the first time you both went through your deck, because that means that you've gone through all your defense reactions, unless you've been pitching them strategically, and they've gone through most of their threats. So now comes the time where the Warrior player starts running out of gas and has to use stuff like blue Warrior's Valors and blue defense attack reactions, because they're slowly running out of those like critical punishing cards. And that's when you start running out of all these defensive cards, and you can use your equipment strategically to set yourself up with like a 4 or 5 card hand to put pressure back. And if you're on par in life, eventually, blocking, if they go for something like attack of a Dawnblade, and you're like, okay, I'll just take 3, I don't know, they might raise a reflex it, you're like, ouch. And then you have a 5 card hand to really put the pressure back on them. Yeah,
because you want to avoid, like, one thing I see as well, if you play a bit too aggressively, you want to avoid falling into like the death spiral against Warrior, which is like late game, you get down to about sort of 6-ish life or so. And then the problem is they can just attack with their Dawnblade by itself, maybe like 6 or below life. And then you're forced to block sort of multiple cards every turn. Because you're like, if I don't block here, they can actually just win the game by playing two attack reactions, and there's nothing I can do without a defense react. Yeah. And particularly late game, you can just fatigue out by that. It's a fatigue where you just run out of cards. And again, like Carol mentioned, if you just block all game, you need to be aware, if they play Warrior's Valor attack and you block with 3 cards, they've used 1 card from their deck, and you've used 3 cards from yours. And they've got 9 Warrior's Valors. So like over the course of the game, if you're doing that every single time, that's really going to stack up. So we do recommend you play defensively, but also you need to have a game plan in mind, and you need to sort of practice like the turn or the time that you're going to like seize back the initiative and go for it. So, and that's a mistake that I've made on Brute playing against Warrior. I felt like I blocked really well.
I feel like it's something I forgot to mention to you before you went into Nationals.
Because Carol's kind of like, he kind of taught me how to play the deck for Nationals, and he's like telling me how to block and everything.
I'm like, just play defensively against Warrior. It's fine.
Play defensively, it's all good.
Like, and did you set up that Toma Finder at the end to do like a big 6 card?
Yeah, and I'm like, what? What do you mean?
I'm like, oh.
Yeah, because the problem is, like, I felt like I actually blocked really well in some of these games. Like, I was real proud of myself. I'm like, oh, did I block this? And then like I called this bluff. And then, that's all well and good, but then when we both got down to about, 10 to 15-ish life, looking back on the game...
And that's a really kind of important number, 10 to 15, because that is the number that you can afford to take a hit.
Yep.
And you won't get blown out by, if you're on 5 life, you can get blown out by, like, a blue overpower even, and lose the game. Whereas that 10-15 is a good time where you've got a buffer of life to take back the initiative, and also that's usually when both players went through their all their cards once.
Exactly. So that's what I've done before. We're both around that life level 12 or 13, and then the warrior player attacks, and I block it all out with 3 or 4 cards or whatever, and so I'm just like, yeah, another great block for me. And then sort of like, it happens again, and I'm like, another block, and then like 2 or 3 turns after that, when I start to realize it's a bit too late, I'm realizing I'm going to run out of cards before them.
Yeah.
And then they've got me in this spot where now I'm in a situation where like I can't afford to start blocking with these threats, so I'm having to make these risky plays to stay in the game. So again, it differs by deck, what you're playing, if it's Brute, Guardian, Ninja, etc., but you kind of, this will only come with time. It comes with time and practice. And the same thing for blocking, like, blocking against Warrior, it's like feeling the rain against your skin, no one else can do it for you. No one else. No. But it's one of those things. You just need to, like, we can talk all day long about it, but you do need to just practice, play out the games. You're probably going to lose a bunch of games, but we hope if you put some of these tips and advice into practice, it might actually, you lose a couple of games and you start to feel that these are working out. So, like, I guess
so basically just look at your list and take out the cards that either block for 2 and don't do anything, and in a situation where you only have 2 cards in hand, take away a lot of these kind of set up aggressive cards, streamline your list to block extremely well, and then have a bit of a kind of a really fluid list that you can constantly put on pressure with 2-3 cards. I feel like that's really important.
And also, don't be afraid to play more than 60 cards, I feel, against Warrior. Because, like, that's...
I thought you were going to say another one.
Oh, okay, no. Keep on his toes. Because...
can't see without my glasses.
Sometimes... I know from, like Magic and stuff, you always want to play 60 card lists. Against Warrior, like, it might even be correct to play 68 to 70 cards if you need to. Like, you might even have cards in there that aren't that good against Warrior, but you just have them in there to block. Like, I was running Arg Smash against...
just block.
Yeah, I was in Brood, I was running Arg Smash against Warrior. You know how many items they run? Like 0. But it's a card that blocks for 3, it pitches for 2. So I know that's just like 2 cards that I can throw out to whatever. I feel like the final thing I think we maybe missed for defense reactions, we're talking about how critical it is to save them. Just a common thing that I see people do wrong that I think is good to avoid is if they do something like, we keep going about Warrior's Valor, but the Warrior's Valor or Spoils for War play, and they're attacking in from anywhere between 4 to like 7 with their weapon, or usually somewhere between 5 and 7 with their weapon. 4 to 6 with their weapon, that kind of thing. But just be aware of, like, you can get really punished for being greedy with your defense reactions there. Like, if they're attacking in for 5 and you just block the 3 damage, and then think, I can just also then follow up with a Sink Below or a Springboard Somersault from Arsenal. You really need to be aware of the math. Like, when you're blocking, think, like, if I block for X amount, how much can they get it above? If you're blocking for 7, a card from hand plus a defense reaction for 4, and they're attacking for 5, that is effectively useless. Because none of their attack reactions pump for 2, right? They all block, they all pump for, like, 3, or they're, like, utility cards. So... just be aware that, like, if you want to have an insurance policy in defense reaction, make sure that an insurance policy is actually worth it.
Yeah. And that 3 for attack reaction is a very magic number, and it's something that is the best thing to keep in mind. Being like, oh, they're attacking me for 5, so that's potentially 8, because most of the attack reactions pump for. That are kind of utility one. I mean, the kind of ones that are just kind of
like damage, or
the damage ones are mostly for 3. I mean, things like route. Then you're adding another kind of layer of complexity, or kind of like overpowers. Those are very powerful, but they're very expensive.
Yeah.
So that is something that's scary when they have a lot of cards in hand, basically.
Yeah, so cards like routes, I mean, we won't go into that. It's kind of a bit more complicated, but just to let you know, it's like a 2 cost attack reaction, gives your weapon +3, and reprise it can return a blocking card to the opponent's hand. So obviously, an attack for 6, you block for 6, and then they route, it gives them +3, and then you -3 effectively. Usually I run like 1 to 2 of those, so that's kind of a topic for another time, and it doesn't come up as much as these other ones. It's something to be aware of. And I guess, like, yeah, there's definitely situations you'll encounter that we haven't spoken about, and our advice is just to try, like, learn from them over time. We mentioned +3 is the magic number. Sometimes you'll see warrior players, they are classic players if they have 1 resource up. They play a Singing Steelblade to give their weapon +1. They look up an Iron Song, they find an Iron Song response from their deck and play that for 0 to give it +3. And then that's +4. And then suddenly you're like, get rid of cow, you idiots, you told me +3. Like, but again, so we just wanted to give like a general overview of tips, of general things you can do in your gameplay to try and avoid pitfalls, common mistakes, and make your game against warrior a little bit better.
And if you're still struggling, there are some more options. So with Runeblade, for example, you know, you might try something like a Enchanted Melody, which is a card that is really good in general to stop warrior, because it's that kind of barrier that they have to overcome, and it still works against reprise triggers, stuff like that. So let's say you put an Enchanting Melody down in play. They attack with Warrior's Valor, Warrior's Valor.
So the melody, it's a 2-cost aura with Go Again, and next time you take damage, prevent up to 4 damage.
The red one prevents 4 damage, So basically that's kind of like a buffer, that like a shield for you that says, you know what, like if you have an attack reaction, you're going to have to get through this melody. So if you want to go real defensive, it's a great choice to just slap it down. If they attack you for 6 with the classic Warrior of his Valor, Dawnblade, then you block for 6 with your 2 cards, and then the pressure's on them to go over that barrier. So it's just a really it's like an extra buffer against warrior. If you're somewhere going to armories and you're versing 5 warriors, that could be another kind of tool that you could use in any list, especially Runeblade and Kano, who can both actually utilize it with their hero abilities. Yeah.
So I think in summary, we've basically gone through it all. I suppose on a final note, Refraction Bolters, I feel we kind of didn't talk about that enough, but it's the warrior equipment that if their weapon attack is dealt damage, you can destroy it to give the attack Go Again. If they're going to destroy it in the early game, even if they get like a counter on Dawnblade even, or if you can like afford to block it out, that's kind of worth it because it removes that ongoing threat for the rest of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, late game, you just need to respect that it's there. But, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of these things that the longer it stays in game, it kind of creates a constant threat for you. So good warrior players will save it as long as possible, and sometimes pop it to get a big advantage. But
so just keep it in mind for super late game. Just know that it's there, that like if I take this damage, they're going to be able to crack the Refraction Bolters and attack back in for probably 4 more damage using the Brave Forge. So that's just something you kind of learn to play with over time.
Exactly.
Anyway, I guess we should wrap things up. We've probably, as always, spoken a little bit longer than we thought.
But I think we covered a lot of the bases when it comes to playing against warrior. Play super defensively. Really respect your equipment and the equipment that blocks, especially. Learn to play against attack reactions, specific ones, and value your defense reactions, and try and put pressure with 2 or 3 cards. And then basically, you're happy to trade throughout a game, and then try and have at least one play that you're kind of pitching away for late game, or set up over the course of the game with something like potions, or something like a Bloodsheath Skeletor and Runeblade, to really regain the tempo, basically.
Yeah, and I guess that's it from us today. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed this first kind of real life flesh and blood recording.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll look forward to doing a few more in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Good to see you.
See you. Bye from us, everyone.